川普总统颁布的微信禁令，在美国时间星期天9月20号就要生效了。这是川普在8月6号颁布的一道行政令，将禁止美国管辖之下的个人或公司跟拥有微信的中国公司腾讯进行任何交易，否则呢将受到法律制裁。这项禁令可以说是一时激起千层浪，在华人社区引起不小的震动。有些华人到现在可能还在担心，不知道能否继续使用微信。更有几名华人律师带头发起一个诉讼案，起诉川普总统和联邦商务部长罗斯，声称这个微信禁令违反了他们的言论自由等美国宪法所赋予的权利。他们的指控站不站得住脚呢？这么一个司法案件背后实质的角力又是什么呢？这个案子可能会对美国华人造成什么样的影响？我邀请了一位美国知名的社会学家和中国问题专家，他的名字叫毛思迪。你可别以为他是个姓毛的华人，其实呢，他是一个地地道道的美国人，真正的名字叫 Steven Mosher， 目前是美国人口研究所的所长。他跟中国的关系呢，要拉回40年。在70年代末、80年代中美建交的初期，因为卡特总统向邓小平提出来，使得当时年轻的 Steven Mosher 成为了美国第一位对中国进行第一手详细研究的学者。他学会了说流利的普通话和广东话，在中国以毛思迪的名字而闻名，可以说他是美国最早的中国问题专家之一。但是不久之后，因为他发表了中共不喜欢的言论，当局就不让他再进入中国了。而且他就学读博的斯坦福大学因为中共政府的压力而把他开除，当时震惊了美国。毛思迪后来担任过著名的智库克莱门特研究所的亚洲研究中心主任，以及美国向中国广播委员会的成员。在继续看下去之前，如果您还没有订阅我的频道的话，就赶快行动吧！我会经常采访一些知名的专家学者，带来深度的分析。大家好，欢迎来到走入美国，我是辛恬。在禁令颁布的2天之后，几名华人律师组成了一个名字叫美国微信用户联合会的组织，在8月21号跟5名个人原告以及吃货小分队一起在旧金山向北加州联邦地区法院递交了诉状，指责呢这份行政令侵犯了他们的言论自由、宗教活动自由以及宪法所赋予的其他权利，要求停止执行。9月15号，堪萨斯大学通过电子邮件向学生和教职员工宣布，从9月20号起，禁止用户在大学所拥有的和管理的电子设备以及校园 WiFi 上使用微信。接着9月16号，司法部向法院提交文件表示，即将实施的微信禁令并不会针对仅仅使用这个 App 进行聊天交流的用户。司法部还表示，如果普通用户继续使用或下载微信的话，他们不用担心会承担刑事或民事责任。到了9月17号，北加州联邦地区法院第一次针对此案开庭，当然是在线上进行的视频听证会。听证的焦点呢，就是原告要求法庭颁发临时限制令 （Preliminary Injunction）。也就是说，要禁止川普总统的行政令按时执行。好，我们先告诉大家听证会的结论。法官当天呢，并没有决定是否会颁发这个临时限制令。法官 Laurel Biller 表示，目前无法对于还没有发生的事情做出裁决，所以呢，当天的听证会就没有发布任何限制微信禁令执行的法令。他说，需要等到星期天9月20号，商务部发布执行细则之后再说。虽然说这是一个司法案件，但其实在背后角力的并不是简简单单的法律纠纷。为什么这么说呢？我们来听听毛思迪先生 Steven Mosher 的分析。首先，针对原告声称微信禁令违反了宪法第一修正案的观点，他认为应该看看这件事情的上下文。
And the context is this, that the Chinese Communist Party has a vast data collection program, collecting the private information of as many people around the planet as they can. I believe the ultimate goal is to set up not just a social credit system in China, covering 1.4 billion Chinese, but also to set up a kind of political credit system or social credit system with regard to elites and businessmen and political leaders and leaders in all fields of society from all countries around the world. I think that collecting that private data would greatly benefit the Chinese Communist Party. It would enable them to more easily recruit spies from among populations overseas. It would enable them to find vulnerabilities in, say, the personal finances of individuals in the United States, Canada, and Europe, that vulnerabilities they could then exploit, perhaps in terms of blackmail or bribery. I think that it's in the interest of the United States and in the interest of the citizens of the United States to try and stop this kind of data collection.
他说 ，TikTok 和微信在收集美国人的数据是众所周知的。加上2017年中共出台规定，要求中国公司主动地向中共统战部提供用户信息。
So I understand the argument about the First Amendment, but the First Amendment I do not think gives people the right to transmit information about others to a hostile foreign government.
因此，毛思迪认为司法部会赢得这场官司的。但如果目前的法官最终是批准了原告方面的临时限制令，他就会觉得很惊讶。但是他说，即便如此的话，他相信司法部一定会上诉，一路打到最高法院。而最高法院已经有过裁决，外国公民在美国并不享有第一修正案言论自由。当然了，这个案子的原告都是在美国的华人。
But I wonder who's putting up the funding. I wonder who is funding this litigation. Is it the ordinary WeChat user who is simply communicating with family and business partners back in China occasionally? Or is it the Chinese government, which is simply using a few Chinese American plaintiffs as front men, as front people, in order to use the laws of the United States against it? And I think, speaking as an American citizen, it is disconcerting for me to see a one-party dictatorship that absolutely controls everything that its people see and do, that runs a totalitarian system where no one has any rights, much less freedom of expression. There's no Bill of Rights in the People's Republic of China. The Constitution guarantees such rights. Those are dead letters. They're not observed at all. And so to have a one-party dictatorship use our own laws against us in order to collect information on not just Chinese Americans, but other Americans, I think that eventually an open society has to begin to defend itself against such attacks from a closed society. And this is where we should draw the line.
毛思迪强调，开放社会在保护自己人民的过程中，要防止伤害到人们的基本权利。宪法第一修正案就是其中很重要的一项。但是他说，美国绝对不允许让一个一党独裁的政权利用开放社会来攻击自己。
To destabilize and undermine our political system. That's what's happening now. United front tactics, of course, were used very effectively during the Chinese Civil War many decades ago. Xi Jinping has repeated the line of the late Chairman Mao Zedong that the Chinese Communist Party has three magic weapons. And those three magic weapons are propaganda, United front tactics, and the People's Liberation Army.
他说，其中中共用的最多的就是利用宣传来洗脑，然后用统战策略来渗透和控制某些组织，使其为中国共产党所用。
That, I think, is the ultimate purpose of WeChat, for example, in the United States, and it should not be allowed.
那为什么他怀疑是中共政府在资助这个诉讼案呢？毛思迪说，因为在美国，一般这类的诉讼案都会做成集体诉讼，否则的话，律师费是相当昂贵的。但是他很怀疑原告能够找到5万到10万的华裔美国人来参与这个诉讼，同意以违反了他们的言论自由来起诉美国政府。
Big companies, legal firms, charge by the hour. So the cost of pursuing this litigation is rising at several $1,000s for each hour that the legal firm spends on it. Someone with very deep pockets is clearly behind this effort. And so I suspect that we're not talking about individual WeChat users in the United States. I suspect we're talking about some entity of the Chinese government.
针对这一点呢，我在研究这个案子的时候，也发现了很蹊跷的地方。在原告庞大的律师团里，有一名来自中国大陆的律师，名字叫朱可亮。仔细看呢，就会发现这位朱律师是毕业于中国青年政治学院。这个中国青年政治学院原来是中共中央宣传部直接管辖的国家级单位，最早是在中央团校的基础上所组建的，历任的校长、院长都是由共青团中央书记处的第一书记兼任的。而他所代表的案子呢，基本上都是中国大型的国营企业。而且他的律师事务所在全球的办公室包括34个中国大陆城市以及香港。另外，毛思迪认为，如果从对等关系的原则出发，也应该禁止微信在美国运作。
If China forbids an American social media company like Twitter from operating in China, then the United States should reciprocate by forbidding any Chinese-owned and operating company like WeChat from operating in the United States. We ought to have strict reciprocity in all matters. And I think that alone rules out allowing WeChat to service people in the United States.
原告声称，微信是他们用来跟中国大陆的家人联络的唯一社交媒体工具，因为即便他们转用了其他的社交媒体应用，但是在中国的家人是无法转用的，因为其他的这些应用呢，都是被中共当局禁止使用的。这一点呢，很多华人也是这么认同。那毛思迪怎么看呢？他指出，限制中国人对社交媒体应用的选择，并不是美国政府所做的事情，而是中国共产党政府所做的。他限制进出中国的信息流通，审查进入中国的信息，禁止美国社交媒体公司在中国营运。他说，他当然很欢迎中共当权者能够开放。他认为，如果中国人有选择的权利的话，他们一定会选择 Twitter 这种不受审查的社交媒体应用。
The fact is, the choice has been restricted by the Chinese Communist Party. It is the party that is abusing its control of WeChat in China to collect information and censor information. And therefore, we should simply view WeChat as an extension of, as an arm of, as a propaganda arm and a propaganda tool for the Chinese Communist Party, and should not be allowed to operate in the United States of America.
他认为那些个人原告其实呢是被中共政府为了达到自己的目的而利用了。
And for Chinese Americans who wish to communicate with relatives in China, there are other ways to communicate, by letter, by phone. They can, of course, organize and lobby for more openness on the part of the media in China. They ought to join the rest of the world in rejecting the kind of censorship, the kind of control that the party is imposing on the Chinese people. That I think is where they should draw the line.
他希望华人能够看大局。
I think at the end of the day, although it temporarily inconveniences some Chinese Americans and some Americans who wish to communicate with China, that in the long run, it is a good thing to not allow the party to collect data on hundreds of millions of Americans, which it will use not for their good, but for their ill. That it will use not to bolster U.S.-China relations, but to undermine and seek advantages over the United States and over its citizens. At some point, we have to protect ourselves. And clearly, with the spread of the CCP virus, makes it clear that the threat from the People's Republic of China is not just an economic threat. It's not just a threat to our health and well-being. It's also a threat to our fundamental freedoms, including freedom of speech.
不管原告和原告律师是否有中共政府的背景，毛思迪呢想要提醒。
But I do think that anyone who becomes an American citizen does take an oath of loyalty to the United States of America and to the Constitution of the United States. And anyone who's in that position should understand that living in the United States and perhaps getting married in the United States and raising children in the United States, that whatever the inducements being offered by the Chinese Communist Party to serve its interests and the interest of the People's Republic of China over that of the United States is not in the interest of his family and his children. After all, America is the last best hope of mankind when it comes to freedom and democracy. If we lose the United States, I think we lose freedom globally. I think the current international system will be controlled from Beijing and not from New York and not from Brussels, and the world will be a much darker place. So I would hope that everyone would see the big picture here, that we are in a civilizational confrontation with a one-party dictatorship that literally wants to dominate the world. And it's not in the interest of the people of the United States, nor in the interest of the people of China for that.
他最后还表示，即将到来的美国大选是比2016年意义更加重大的一次选举，将决定我们自己、我们的子孙后代将生活在什么样的一个社会和世界中。确实，作为华人，是想要继续被一个手机应用所造成的不方便而困扰呢，还是说要把眼光放得更长远一些呢？为了抗击这个诉讼案，联邦司法部9月10号向法院提交了长达52页的抗辩文件，并表示美国华人不应该因为无法继续使用他们喜欢的一款应用，就对总统基于国家安全理由的行政令而做出主观臆断，起诉总统。其实，那个原告美国微信用户联合会声称是代表了美国所有的微信用户，但是网上已经有人说，他们并没有获得自己的认可，怎么就可以代表他们了呢？微信禁令的问题，说到底体现了一个自由社会和一个专制社会通过全球化加深交往之后产生的问题。专制社会会利用自由社会的开放原则，把专制的价值和做法输出到开放社会。但是，专制社会却可以利用自己的封闭做法来筛选和阻挡来自自由社会的价值、言论和人员。在这种不对等的交往之下，自由社会是很难影响和改变专制社会的，但是后者却很有可能会颠覆前者。这也就是为什么目前川普政府和很多美国人终于意识到了几十年的接触政策对中共是不管用的。那么，面对专制政权的颠覆威胁，美国是可以用对等原则来减轻来自中共等专制国家的影响。不过，就像毛思迪先生所说的，在这么做的过程中，也要很小心，不能破坏了自由社会的开放原则。所以呢，其实我们是需要更能够治本的方法， 比方说，在微信、抖音这些技术方面，如果美国政府和自由社会能够投资和支持新的科技开发，彻底粉碎专制国家的网络和资讯长城，没有了资讯的封锁保护，专制体制的倒塌也就是时间问题了。到时候，自由世界也就不用再担心被专制颠覆了。好的，今天的节目呢就到这里了，欢迎您在下面留言、点赞、订阅和转发。我们下次节目再见。